Experiencing the Threshold. I'm Vanessa Couto, and this space is where we linger in the in-between. Those moments when life asks us to pause, to listen, and to cross into something new. In today's conversation, I'm joined by astrologer, storyteller, mentor, and friend Brian Clark. Together we explore the threshold as both pause and passage, a place of shedding and becoming, of grief and anticipation. We wander through images of descent and darkness, not as something to fear, but as the fertile ground where beginnings take root. Along the way, we speak of rituals, beauty, and imagination as companions for the crossing, and of curiosity as the lantern that lights the way. This episode is an invitation to honor the thresholds in your own life, to see them not as interruptions, but as initiations. So settle in, maybe light a candle, and let's step across together. How are you doing, Brian?
Well, doing better now that I'm talking to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming to my podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me. Now, we sound like we're being very polite, aren't we?
Yeah, right. That's okay. We're just being, there'll be other guests listening to this. So,
well, I guess politeness is part of a threshold, isn't it? We're on a threshold. We're about to do something. And so how do we enter that becomes very important.
Yeah, tell me more about that. The politeness in light of a threshold.
Well, for me, I think it's important, isn't it? When somebody comes to your door, they're on the threshold. You're really polite. However, now that I say that, there's times people have got to my door, but I'm not that polite. They usually carry a Bible or a Seventh-day Adventist. But sorry if anyone's listening there. So I think that there's a sense of how we recognize greeting people at the gate, how we greet ourselves at the gate, how we go through a gate. That's all part of what we're about to speak about, I think, isn't it?
It is. And I was just thinking here when you said to greet someone at the gate, sometimes we're greeting someone we know, where we're that guest, but sometimes it's somebody we don't know,
Oh, absolutely. Well, it was very important in the ancient Greeks, wasn't it, to always greet? And this is the sense of, an incredible Greek tradition of honoring those people at the door, because it could be a god. It could be a god, especially at a threshold. There was always a sense that might have been somebody, not someone who was divine, but the divine presence was there at the threshold.
Mm-hmm. So just to start really here, so it's speaking of threshold. For you, what is a threshold? How would you define it personally?
Well, I mean, how would I define it? The way I think about the word is it's got threshold. So the thresh often is like to tread, and to hold, because I think part of crossing a threshold, what we're speaking about, is also an act of holding. So to tread and hold. So that would talk about a threshold as a place that we are treading very carefully. There's a stillness to it. Over time, when we taken those words together to tread or to hold, the holding has also been seen as a place. So a threshold is a place, and one of the so it's a place. It's this particular place that something's happening in. But that word was also used threshing. A threshing floor was like a surface where people would take the harvested grain stalks and step on them, or sometimes animals they'd step on them, and they would create this process where they would beat down and separate the grain, and then what would happen is they would remove, if you will, the chaff by winnowing. Winnowing was to throw them up in the air, and the air would take the chaff away, and what would be left was the grain. And so I oftentimes think about the threshing floors, or the threshing floor, the threshold as a part of a place where we tread on old parts of ourselves, and we winnow them. In other words, yeah, like we start to separate the wheat from the chaff on the. So it's like that sense of, the threshold is a very powerful image to me.
Yeah.
How do you see it, Vanessa? How do you see the threshold?
I guess for a long time I saw threshold as more of a not a super clear, so you go from here to there, you cross, go through the gateway or the doorway, but more of a sort of a space that you're in the in-between. So for a long time, when I was a kid constantly traveling, I thought the airport to me was an image of a threshold. It's you're moving around, but you're not quite there at your destination. I do think the threshold, it is something we're constantly crossing. Like before we started recording, we touched on that. Life is one big one, right?
Yeah.
You're born, that's a big threshold coming in. You die, that's a big threshold going to another place. And then between that, there's several of them. Some are bigger, some are smaller. And certain life phases are thresholds too. They take a long time. So I've always thought that the threshold, when you mentioned the Greeks in, having a sense of it could be a deity, it could be the gods were present at a threshold. I've always felt that the threshold was a place where things that could be magical or unexpected could happen. There's a sense of luck could happen. You never knew who you're going to meet or what was going to happen. Later on, as I started, studying more and such, I think I got to see more images of the threshold as places that could be more of a trial. There's more of a testing, it can be more challenging to cross. And I think sometimes thresholds are places we just kind of slip through. We didn't even pay attention.
Yeah.
Other times we meet the dweller at the threshold, the guardian at the threshold, and we're like, oh, here it is. Kind of like the customs officer at the airports, the immigration officer. So I think there are many kinds of thresholds, but I've always, in some ways, been fascinated by the threshold because even as a kid, not really knowing what a threshold was, not having the words for it, I felt that when my family immigrated to the U.S., being a foreigner was, to me, and it still kind of is, like living on the threshold. You're kind of neither really fully here and not really from where you're from anymore, in some ways. So sometimes I think of the threshold as almost like a lived place, if that makes any sense.
Makes great sense, because the sense is the lived place is the life that we have right now, as you said. We're constantly on a threshold between life and death, but aren't we all foreigners? when we incarnate, we are all foreigners. But where we have something in common here is like you. I moved when I was very young. When I was 2.5 years old, we took the boat to France, and I lived in France for the first 3 years of my life. And I still remember or hear those incredible voices, the French voice in my ear. But as you were speaking, it's like that. Another word we use for threshold is limen, don't we? So the liminal point. And so we have many limens. We have prelimens. We're preliminary. We talked about before we got on. We had a preliminary session. We were speaking, and we also have subliminal. When we go right underneath, we also have eliminate. So when we eliminate something, so there's there's many things that happen in these thresholds of life. We sometimes in them, go down. Sometimes we go up. Sometimes we move. But I think it's very important to think about that sense that the limen or threshold is always some sense of transition. I feel it that way. Like we're in transition now. All of life is a transition. So I think what we do is in our work is we try to access certain times that are more liminal. We know when we're in a process of change, and how can we use these ideas of crossing a threshold to help us move through the change. I think that becomes really quite important.
Yes, I think as you're saying that, a thought just came to me that I never really thought about. Maybe a liminal space or the threshold is what are they called? Those little Russian nesting dolls,
Oh, yeah.
And I think sometimes when we're going through a big transition or a more layered one, it's like those little Russian dolls.
Yeah.
You go through one little mini threshold, and then within that bigger threshold, there's another little one, and then there's another one.
Yeah. Well, that's the constancy of change, isn't it? And the kind of sense of how so much of us wants to settle. I mean, we're creatures. Well, there's a part of us, not all of us, I guess. Like some have it more than others, but still, an archetypal process of us as human beings is to settle, and you can't settle on a threshold. You can't. It's a kind of a movie. It's a bit like a conveyor belt, I guess, in some way. But we're treading, and I like that. That's why the thresh. I love that word thresh. We use the word threshing about. We oftentimes are threshing about on the threshold.
Yes. We don't go kicking and screaming through the threshold.
So,
don't go on.
Well, I was going to ask you. If what comes to mind for you as a threshold, like when do you recognize a threshold, or when do you recognize that you're on the threshold, or are you always on the threshold?
That's a good question. I think sometimes I know it's not just your everyday threshold, It isn't just me coming back from an international trip and going through, the airport threshold. It's there's something more to it. Is, I guess, when I feel both a bit apprehensive, slightly anxious, having a sense that this is something more that I don't know, but also sometimes a bit more excited. Oh, there's something coming. And sometimes I sense it as like there's a shift in the air,
Yeah.
Something, a disturbance in the force,
Yeah.
Something like I'm picking something up. Sometimes I feel when, and this might be when I'm already further in, I notice that things that used to be soothing or that I really enjoyed or I was constantly doing, all of a sudden they don't hold that much pleasure. They don't do it anymore. And that's when I start feeling like, oh, there's something different here. There's something moving, stirring.
Is that sense of feeling lost part of it, do you think? Or feeling loss, feeling both being lost and loss? I mean, certainly there must, not just a must, there is, I would say, the grief that comes with also, you mentioned the excitement, there's also the loss, isn't there? There's the grief of what we're leaving behind and the excitement of what's to come. So we recognize that we're in this kind of almost duplex of self where we have part of the basement of ourselves is mourning for what we're leaving behind. Life has changed. I'm no longer that youthful guy who used to be able to run and win the race, now. And yet, on the other side, there's something else I didn't have.
Yeah.
In that. And so it's also kind of takes us out of our normal way of seeing and thinking. Also takes us out, I feel, of our normal way of being sensual and sensuous. The way that we feel things is different. The way that we smell things is different.
Yeah.
Especially the way we see things. But it is that, really difficult complex of grief and excitement, which is so much part of life. That that duality of life of wanting to belong and wanting to say, but also wanting to separate. Wanting to be in one place, but also want to be separate from that. And so that's why what you mentioned before, Vanessa, to me is interesting. Is in the Greek idea, there was always an epiphany in a threshold. So that's where you meet the god. Now, oftentimes it's Hermes mainly. Well, of course, Hermes is the great god, but Hermes is the hinges on the gate. So that every time we move the gate, he's swinging us through there. But there's all kinds of gods we meet on the threshold. I think that when we're on that movement, especially the movement we're speaking about now, this movement of the winds of change of our life are changing. We're moving somewhere. And it's uncertain. There's also uncertainty. That's why we have this divine presence, because on a threshold, we discover the other aspects of our life, which are not really literal or linear. They're much more cyclical and divine. And there's oftentimes a representation of that when we're crossing the threshold, which gives me a great lot of faith and trust as I move through those times of life.
As you're saying, I'm thinking the stories I tend to enjoy are the movies. In some ways, whenever they portray, let's say, the threshold, even though they're not being, in your face about it, but it's there. It shows that the threshold is a place where magic, if you will, can enter. So it's that's usually when I sense there's something extra, when coincidences are happening, synchronicities or the dreams, something shows up that you're like, oh, this is out of the ordinary.
And what's so important too, though, is just to hold those threshold, to hold about what people usually do, of course, is they rush off. Oh, they have a synchronicity and that means something. And then they're off, or they have a dream and that is interpreted to mean and they rush off. Or they have a transit in the horoscope, which tells them. And a threshold isn't about running off. It's about staying with it, because the imagination of the magic that you described is not an omen. It's part of life. And this is teaching us to actually appreciate this part of life. What is this part of life? It's only uncertain because it's a different way of being. It's just a different way of being. And that's the beingness that introduces us to a soulful part of living. And that's why it's oftentimes complex and grief-stricken, because when we're on the threshold, it's not like we can literalize, oh, now what I'm going to do is do this and do that and do that, and I'll be okay. So we just have to hold it and sit with it. And that's why I think part of the threshold crossing ritual becomes very important. What ritual can we do to honor this new way of life,
For you, what is a ritual? How would you define a ritual?
A ritual is something one does to embrace things that are greater than we can understand. Now, we have our daily rituals and we have our literal rituals, which is like our literal rituals. We got to sleep, we got to eat. So we have those rituals, and those are very important rituals because they help hold our life together. So when we're on the threshold, I'll say, keep ritual. Make sure you get that enough sleep, because usually on a threshold we're up and not sleeping, we're not eating. So I'd encourage people to do that. But the other rituals would be to invite the presence of that which we can't do anything about, and that is to be still. That is to perhaps maybe meditate, maybe take a walk every day, or to do something that connects you to that magic that you spoke about. Not to make that magic happen, but to connect you to that. And may I now say, one of your rituals, I think, during this time has been your reading of romance. Is taking you out of a life that you once knew. You don't know that's where you're going with. So everybody finds their own rituals. It is a passion, connected to a passion. So yes, to read, to meditate, to walk, to sing, to paint. Usually, if you want to attract the muses, they get attracted easily when you decide to be creative. And that doesn't mean to be artistic. It just means to create something in your life that allows you to honor a new altar for this next phase of your life. So maybe it's just creating an altar in your house. I think when I'm in thresholds, I find myself moving my furniture around. I find myself, I'm moving my furniture. I'm trying to create a space in myself, which I have to see outside myself. That's just me. So I need to know that picture's in the right place, right? I need to know that the books are all straight in the bookshelf. I know that. I know that instinct in me is to want to see beauty. And it's not just a physical beauty. I want it to be nice, but I also know that it inspires me to other forms of beauty. So for me, on a threshold, I want to see things that are beautiful. Yeah, things that are.
I feel the same way. There's something about beauty that it calls to me, and I'm just thinking here, when I really started thinking of threshold, or more actually the liminal space as a geography, a landscape that we are traversing, was after my father died. So there's the grief, right? There's the grief element right there. And I remember after that, I really started taking photos of flowers in my neighborhood from, early spring on, full bloom. And my phone is full of pictures of flowers. There was something about capturing that beauty and seeing the transition of the flowers from, just bud to full bloom.
Yeah.
The element of beauty is when I notice too, I might not rearrange my furniture, but I might change the pictures on the walls, or I will create an altar. Yeah. Something about beauty needs to be close by.
Well, the thing about beauty, and I remember James Hillman saying this, is that beauty arrests us, it stops us. And that's what we need to do in the threshold. We need to be stopped. We don't want to be rushing into anything. We're not rushing to understand what our dreams mean or astrological chart. Rushing to understand anything, just to be in the stillness of this moment of presence, to be arrested. Well, some people do get arrested on the threshold, but I'm not talking about that kind of being arrested. I'm talking about a more, I guess, spiritual, being spiritually arrested. And there's nothing like beauty to do that, is there? Takes our breath away.
Yes. And I think being a beauty, which is, if you will, a lot more pleasant. But I think when we're going through the threshold, thinking about your image of the thrashing, is that the way we tend to approach things and see the world, sort of our tunnel vision to check items on our checklist, that gets wiped away. And it's things that have more substance to them, however that is for the individual, be it beauty, be it something that arrests them. Yeah. I feel, to me, that's a sure sign I'm in it, I might not have been paying attention before, but I'm in it now. When I notice that I don't want to check the list. I want to have something more soulful, and more nourishing in that level.
And that's where the word subliminal is important too, isn't it? Because there is a subliminal nature of being on a threshold, and that sense of what's underneath. I think when we're on the threshold, we're more aware of what's underneath. We're aware of a duality inside of us. We're aware of smiling, but yet feeling really lousy. So there's a kind of a sense of being in two worlds, I would say, because we have to remember to be in this world. That's why it's good to remember our rituals in this world, but also to honor the fact that the real big change is that this other world is coming much closer to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that other world is a world of darkness. It's not just a world of lightness, it's a world of darkness. It's a world, when I say darkness, I say that in a great spirit of wonder, because darkness is what we don't see when the lights are on. It's just as important.
So I'm thinking two things when you mentioned darkness. Well, actually, three things. One, our culture is extremely afraid of darkness, right? We don't want to go there at all. The other thing that comes to my mind is in Celtic mythology, the darkness is where everything is born.
Yeah, absolutely.
The day starts at midnight. It doesn't start at, dawn.
Yeah.
And so there's that element, the beginning of their year starts at, Samhain. So there's this element of this comfort of knowing that it's in the darkness that all things start. We start in darkness in the womb, right? The other part that got me thinking when you said darkness is the idea of descent, of going down. Because we touched on that before we started recording. So you mentioned the descent and the threshold. Is there a difference for you with that?
Oh, definitely. Because threshold crossings, we can talk about threshold crossings, and what also comes to mind, all those crossroads, at crossroads, there's thresholds as well. And so threshold crossings are part of our life, aren't they? They're part of our life. And part of our life is, we have certain, thresholds. We go to school, we leave home, we go to school, we leave home, we have a relationship, we have crossing, we have a job, we lose a job. There's all kinds of thresholds. But the descent, a descent is like also crossing a threshold, but it's a threshold now that moves us, I guess, into what we might consider to be the underworld, sometimes the other world. So when we talk about the Celtics, they see that more as the other world, but Greeks talk a lot about it as the underworld. I think there's similarities and subtle differences. And it's a time when we go into that darkness, into that which is unconscious, into that which is unknown, into that which is. And I think that we're called. There's certain reasons. Certainly, the Greek myths tell us so many of the heroes that go into the underworld, and there's certain reasons. I guess we go into the underworld. Well, there's certain reasons we descend. So yes, the descent becomes very powerful in that it has a lot to do with a reconciliation with the past, I think. Not just there's the past in this life, but the past of my ancestors. Sometimes the ghosts that haunt me is a reconciliation with the ghosts of the dark. So the divine nature of descent is that we actually then meet the citizens, or if you will, the inhabitants of the underworld. Everything that we've sort of cast away, or denied, or so it's a very powerful differentiation. But there's a similarity in that we're each a descent and a threshold. The similarity is that we're suspended for a while. We're suspended at a time. I think a descent threshold can be quite, sometimes you can cross a threshold quickly, but with a descent that feels a little kind of more therapeutic, more longer, kind of help me out here.
Well, therapeutic, when you descend, I'm thinking you're serving the gods.
Yeah, you're serving the gods, yes.
It's much bigger, I think.
It's much bigger.
I also was thinking about the expression, the dark night of the soul. I think.
Yes.
From Christian theology.
Yeah.
There's something.
Yeah. See, I guess when you say that, I see like so. If I can use an astrological metaphor, so the threshold is very Hermes kind of and mercurial. We have to swing on the gate and we move through. A descent, as we know, is quite plutonic. Mm-hmm. That sense of movement down, or even or even Neptunian too. The sense of the suspension of it all. There's many different ways we can think about it. I don't want to focus or focus in. I want to focus out here, but I think you're right about that. It's a kind of serving the God. On the threshold, we also encounter the God. And once we encounter a God, we have more trust in being able to descend. And we can move through time. I think in the underworld, we encounter all kinds of things. It's timeless. We're out of time for sure.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, I think. Yeah, I think I have a sense that we all go through it in one way.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Now, the level of aware participation might differ from person to person. I think, I feel that in our culture, it's getting a little better, but I think we're so afraid of it that we medicate it. One of the ways that we deal with it is medicating it. But I feel as humans, at least once we're going to descend in some ways.
Oh, absolutely. Well, absolutely, because loss is part of life. And loss is an incredible part of life and so very important. And once we lose an attachment and that may just be to a dog or a cat or an animal or we, to some part, someone we love, a job, there's a potential descent. But, just to go back to the sense that in our culture, we have, in a way, cut out the dark. I oftentimes say, we allow kind of the light into the bedroom. Everybody takes their phone to bed to read it, and then, the lights are always there. There's a lot of light on the alarm clock. There's this, but it's very difficult for us to take the dark into the light. People just don't want to know. So the sense of the death part of the cycle of life and death, these two nodal points we talk about in life, we've cut one out. And we can't cut it out. The more we cut that out, as we see, the more the culture around us becomes actually fraught with a lot of the living dead. So what happens when we don't descend, when we don't cross the river Styx, we don't bury things properly, as the Greeks said, we hover around like ghosts on the river Styx. We can't get into the underworld. So the more that we deny this in the culture, the more we see it around us. The more we deny it in ourselves, the more that we actually live a lifeless life. And what it's replaced by is what we think is life. What is given to us as life, which is generally in this day and age, it feels like money or prestige or celebrity or acknowledgement. And that's nice. Those are nice things, but they're not life-giving.
No. We become the walking dead, not the zombie-like, but in a way, psychologically zombies,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So,
no, go on. You're going to say.
So, now what were you going to say?
No, I was going to ask what do you think about the role of imagination when you're navigating the threshold or the descent? Or the threshold through the descent.
it is the greatest gift it's the greatest asset we have to me. It's because imagination is another form of seeing. Imagination allows us to see, and when we're in the dark, you can't see very well. There's a wonderful poem by Wendell Berry. What I'll do is I'll send it to you. Maybe you can put it in the notes after. It's about going into the dark. And when one goes into the dark, one then has to have another way of seeing, and I think that's imagination allows us to see that way. There again, in our culture, imagination is seen to be, that's Walt Disney.
Yeah.
Well, and then what they've done to Walt Disney, and then from Walt Disney, we've lost imagination. Imagination's in us; it's alive in us. It is a way of being, because that's the only thing we have is to imagine. Now, unfortunately, though, we also have an imagination that can get on a loop, get stopped. I like to call that the imagination of doom, because, here I am going down and down. Something dreadful is going to happen. This is going to happen, but I can't. I've lost my job. I don't have enough money. It just goes on. It goes in a cycle, and that's imagination as well. But it's a very, very imagination of doom, and it's worry. And then don't tell a doctor about it, because then you'll get drugged. So what I'm saying here is, like, how might we appreciate imagination as a kind of sense of also participating with it? Let's participate with the monster that you're afraid of. That's part of the underworld. Let's participate and imagine what that monster, let's have a conversation. That's what I would ask anyone to do on a threshold who's worried about let's have a conversation with that monstrous part of you that's saying that, you're not going to survive this. Let's see.
I'm thinking here too, like, when I'm really in the thick of it already. I'm in the liminal space. I crossed.
Yeah.
And I find that often what helps me is to have an image. It's either just an image or a story or a myth that can really, then it becomes kind of like a lifeline. Now I can hold on to it and I can look through it. I can come back to that image. So for me, that's why myths, fairy tales, and stories have been so helpful, because usually the image that's going to help me just usually comes to me in a synchronicity, or just pops up, or I find the right book that has it, and it grabs me in a way that it gives me chills, and I know this is the one. And then that's the image that I'm going to be working with for however long I'm in that phase.
Well, the word image is interesting, isn't it? Image, magus, the magician. This is all part of the image. So then, very hermetic in a way, the image has arrived. See, and it's like what we try to do is we try to impose ourselves on imagination, and we want our imagination to take us somewhere rather than letting the imagination take us. We want to direct it. So it's active imagination that we seek, rather than letting go and being uncertain. So you're right about the image. The image takes us. And so that's where myth becomes very important. Myth is so very, very important. And if you look at the Greek myths, which is I tend to do, but all myths are cross-cultural. So they have, in every culture will have these myths of going into the underworld. Go into the underworld to rescue a dead person, like Orpheus goes down to get back Eurydice. But we have to also see these myths as images, as imagination. Not like we're really going down to rescue, going down to actually to reconnect to some darker aspects of ourselves that need to be enlightened or see the light. We also have, good old Heracles' last labor is to go into the underworld, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then we have wonderful myths like Pirithous and Thusis, who enter into the underworld. It really, what do we say, in an aggressive way, in a kind of egoic way, in a kind of, they go down to grab Persephone because they're going to take Persephone, and of course they get stuck. Hades says, "Oh, just go sit over there in those chairs," you know, and they get stuck in the underworld, and they don't remember where they are, and they forget. So what happens is when we impose ourselves in the underworld, when we go down there to get something, we actually get stuck. So the images help us, you know, again, that's where the threshold becomes important, because the images keep us still, keep us holding on. As you described it so well, you held on to that image, or the image held on to you. But that's what the task was. Not to make the image mean anything, but to see where it led you.
Yeah, because I can't recall the name of the myth, but one of the images that helped me navigate grief was one, I can't recall now, but where he has to hold on to the old man in the sea as the old man transforms into all kinds of beasts. But
Proteus, yeah.
What is it called?
Wasn't it Proteus? I know which one you mean. It's Proteus, the old man of the sea. Yeah.
Yeah. He's shape-shifting, and he has to hold on.
Yeah.
And that really helped me. And as you're describing the image or the myth, is I find that, yes, part of me is going to want to try to interpret the myth. But the other part, that I would say the wiser part, is going to let the image serve as almost like a flame of inspiration.
Yes.
It comes when it needs to come, and with time, new meanings kind of unfold from the story.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to be open to the story, to be in dialogue with the story, to see what is going to show me as I do the ritual in some way, as I show up to the story. I think the story opens itself to me, and then we're kind of doing this dialogue dance. And as I'm doing this, I feel like I'm moving through the liminal space with a little bit more ease, because I have something that is both guiding me, holding me, and it's serving to me as a lifeline.
Yeah. Well, you've said something important there, haven't you? You've created a relationship with the image. You are in relationship. You're in a relationship field with the image. It's not just you using images to get something. The images are using you, and that's where I'll go back to what you said so importantly, is that soul making is really about this. Soul making is about this forming a relationship to the divine. And so in this play, that's a great gift of it. As you're speaking, I mean, one of the greatest stories of grief, isn't it? The Homeric hymn tells it so beautifully to Demeter, and Demeter loses her daughter Persephone. And everyone knows this story, but it's really important to keep telling the story, because what happens in her grief and loss and what she goes through her story. But at the end, in terms of the resolution of this particular story, when she now comes out of the underworld and she greets Persephone, is they create these great mysteries. The great mysteries are created, the Eleusinian mysteries. And if we were to sort of say one sentence about those mysteries, it was the mystery of no longer fearing death. Mm-hmm. I would say trusting Psyche. So one of the greatest things about descent is that we no longer fear death. No, I fear dying. I fear dying. I'm like, oh God, the pains and aches of life. But the death is in terms of being on the threshold. As you said it right at the beginning, you said that death was the rebirth. Like, you didn't say the word rebirth, but you said that death was like another threshold into something else. We don't know that. That's the mystery. We'll never know it. But we don't need to be afraid of it anymore. And so we don't need to be afraid of the mystery. So part of the great images of descent are very much what we're speaking about now, is having relationship to the images that lie within us as human beings, as animal hybrids, And those have to do with sometimes with monstrous things, with loss, with tragedy, with, God forbid, trauma. But it is through our kind of a sense of allowing that into our relational field, being with it, that we actually are no longer fear life. And so thank you for that poem to the Homeric hymns by Demeter. It's a very incredible story. Thank you for every story that's been given about the incredible journey into the underworld.
And there are so many.
There's so many.
Yeah. And I'm thinking here, when you said relational, that's where I'm kind of at now, thinking more and more, how can we be more in relationship with these thresholds, these liminal phases? Because individually, we're all going through one or other, but we are also collectively going through a massive liminal transition. And so I think that if as individuals, each one of us could do a little bit of improvement of how we relate to these mysteries, it could help the collective. It could help those who don't know. So that's kind of the idea. What I said, I named this podcast, The Romancing the Threshold, is the idea. The idea behind romance here is not to approach with such fear, but perhaps to approach with the curiosity that we should have, or perhaps could have, when in relating to something other.
Yes, other, absolutely, otherness.
Much like how when we fall in love, right? We go on a date, we want to learn about the other, we want to see the qualities that they have. Yeah. And so I think when we meet these other archetypes or beings while we're on the threshold, I keep thinking that they also want to relate to us, and in a different way, because I would hope that after so many centuries, we have evolved just a little bit, a little bit of psychology, that we could approach them with a bit more curiosity and not think of them as static, as sort of like, that's it, it's done. And I that's where I've been wondering, like, for years now, but this year more so, of like, how can we approach these phases? Yes, we're going to feel the fear and the uncertainty, but how can we approach it with the curiosity of someone who's falling in love, or at least attracted?
Oh, you're a romantic. So am I.
Romantic. I feel like my happy endings.
I've lost my romance along the way, but it's still there. Still there. Not going to go anywhere. But okay, I want to take you right back to the beginning, when we started speaking, because you talked about being foreign. You've been transplanted. So have I. I've been transplanted too. We've all been transplanted. That's how we get here. But I want to come to that form because if we talk about that broader perspective, what we've come in our culture, we're not only afraid of the dark, we're afraid of the foreign. So we actually exile the foreigners. Well, now it's like we have here in Melbourne.
Very literal.
Yeah. We're literal. We have protests every Saturday now outside, like about getting. Let's just get back, send them home. Send what home? This is our home. They are home. It's like, anyway, I don't want to go there. It's because it breaks my heart a bit. But we have exiled the foreigner. What we've forgotten is that we've forgotten this idea of asylum. And asylum, in its original term, was this place for the homeless. We're all homeless. We are homeless. This isn't our home. That's on the threshold. We find another home. So what I'm trying to say here is what I don't know what I'm trying to say, but what it brings up is this sense of other. We can't continue to make the other foreign, because if we do, we will see that there's that duality. Now, we need to make the other separate. There's no doubt about it. You're different than me. Well, yeah, first of all, you're female. You've got longer hair. You're different than me. You're other than me. But you're not foreign to me. You know, this is what I'm using foreign as a sense of lock it up. Lock it up. Or you might have a different idea. So I think what I'm trying to say here is part of the descent is to actually meet the exiled and foreign. Let's use the word exiled more than foreign now, but that's what we're doing. To meet the exiled parts of self. That's the sense of descent. Now I meet them as I descend individually. Now, collectively, I don't know how we do that. I really don't. I can only come back to the fact that we have to each do it ourselves. And that's what's important, not to get caught up with the idea that, oh, well, it could be different because we could all do it. But a lot of people are choosing not to do it. I can't worry about that. No. So maybe you need to edit all that out.
I have so many thoughts I have because it's, of course, very close to my lived experience. I guess I think I go back to curiosity.
Yes.
Because the underrated gift. I never think that curiosity killed the cat.
No, I don't either.
I think curiosity is the oil that keeps things moving. And without curiosity, we tend to become very literal, thus fundamentalist. And then we have no imagination. Curiosity keeps us engaged, you know. And so what I think about, I don't think everybody's going to do the work, unfortunately. There are different levels of awareness and tastes and all those things. I guess I believe that if just a certain kind of amount of people can do it, it's the 100 monkey thing, something might flip, right? So I at least hope that for some people that can be doable. It's not going to be everybody, but if some can, it would be great. And I think it starts with being curious with oneself and the parts of oneself that have been exiled, cast away, hidden, for whatever reason. And I think when we get curious about what we're sensing and seeing, the images, whatever's rising, is a beginning. Just stay curious. I call it the generous curiosity, which to me is different than the sort of that kind of curiosity where we want to get the answer. You know, there's a very focused curiosity. It's more of a generous curiosity. It's like, oh, let me see what you're going to show up with. And so I think it's important in these times to stay curious and stay curious with what's close to you. And so I find that in general, perhaps people work more with things that are more, I like to jokingly sexy, you know, it's more positive, more engaging. So stay curious with your pleasures, the things that you enjoy, and start there. Maybe going for the deep stuff might not be ready. You might not be ready for it. That is a way to stay curious to what gives pleasure and then stay more open to other things that might pop up. Be it things, be it ideas, be it people, right? And this is where beauty comes in. I think beauty is extremely important. Because beauty sets the table. It sets it. It makes it, it's inviting. Now we can come in. And then things may happen. So I think in these times, it's really important to call on beauty. You know, I keep thinking about that idea that without Venus, Mars runs rampant. It needs Venus to help it. And so I think we do need Venus in some ways. We need the beauty, the relation, the relating the curiosity for the other to help us navigate through change.
Well, there's a lot of curiosity.
Say that again?
Who is the god of curiosity? I'm not putting you. I know. What's that?
Mercury.
Of course. So when you say that Hermes, and Hermes is also very much the god of the threshold, as we speak. He's the one that swings the gates. He's the one that so I thought that was quite interesting because to me, what you're saying is so true. So let's go to the god Hermes. He is the one that keeps the carousel of images, right? He's moving the carousel. We're on a carousel of images, and the word curiosity also has the idea of curios in it, memories, sacred objects in a way, which is all part of a descent. Because when we descend, we have memory. When we're on a threshold, the memories are there. Mm-hmm. And it's like we could bring in, other gods here, like Hecate, Hecate Trivia, or we pronounce it Trivia, but it's Trivia, three ways. When we meet Hecate, we're at a crossroads, and so any crossroads, any threshold brings up these incredible memories. And so I would, champion you and continue this idea of curiosity, because it is an evocation and also an experience of Hermes, the threshold. Now, Hermes and Aphrodite, of course, share. There's a wonderful image I love of Hermes teaching the little Cupid, and Aphrodite is watching on, and it's called l'amour à la parole, the love of school, the love of learning, the love of moving. So I think that the Hermes curiosity is also moving. If you don't like it, move. And I'm just saying, get up out of your chair, move, be curious, find something. And I think that's all part of crossing a threshold.
Yeah. And then when you speak of memories, I mean, what are memories other than stories and images?
Stories and images.
Massive feeling tone to it, right?
Yeah. And we carry them in all kinds of ways, we carry them. So our imagination isn't just, it's sometimes in our body, the imagination. We can experience it in our body, it's just not about the mind. It's also experiencing it through our senses. You can walk down the street and smell something, all of a sudden you're back when you're 2 years old or 3 years old, and you just have this memory, this sense that you're being held. And so, like that, these crossings become very important in that way.
And it's interesting too, because they say memory is not quite static. It changes as you change and you think about what happened. It's already moving as well. It's not static at all.
No. I mean, you and I could experience the same thing, but we'd have different memories of it. This is what's so funny about it. And this is where you get in, you have a kind of factual memory, but then you also have a feeling memory. The Mnemosyne, who is the mother of the 9 muses, she is the goddess of memory, but she's the mnemonic. She helps us remember through feeling, through song, through image, through aches in the bodies, through symptoms, through illness. So there's all kinds of ways that memory is accessed if we allow it to be accessed. And this is what we try to reframe memory to serve us. People re-mythologize their lives all the time by making up new stories about themselves to serve us. It doesn't serve us. We need to serve memory.
And it's interesting. She's the mother of the muses.
She's the mother of the muses.
So out of that comes all the creativity that we can express ourselves.
Absolutely.
Well, I was thinking here, and I'm aware of our time too, but this is why the romancing to me now is what I'm playing with. I'm evoking Aphrodite.
You're evoking Well, and the muses, aren't you? You're okay, like in some of the pictures that you search here, I love them. You know, they're back to the pre-Raphaelites,
Oh, I
and
love those paintings.
yeah, it's like, you know, I love that. You know, Edward Burne-Jones and um, Waterhouse, and you know, you'll see it. I have them in pictures around because they remind me of that the romantic period. And what was the romantic period? It was a kind of, or the Renaissance, you know, Botticelli, because it was beauty. They're using mythic images for beauty. These are mythic images and story that they put into paintings. So it's very, the threshold is about a sense of romance. It's artistic. It's beautiful. If we can just, I guess I'd like to say, be open to the God that we're meeting there. And I mean, he's not there to serve us. We're there to serve the deity. And that's so important. We just turn that around and the threshold, I think it'll make that crossing a lot easier. A lot more. Maybe not easier, but a lot more embodied, a lot more authentic, and will help us learn to not be afraid of death or even afraid of life.
Yeah, because in the fear of death, I think we're not doing life any justice either.
We're not at all. No.
I, just as an image, because I've been thinking about death, this came to me when my father died, and this also helped me. Because when I saw it as a landscape, and I realized that there are three sisters: grief, death, grief, and joy. And you couldn't get to joy if you didn't spend some time with grief. So for some reason, to me, grief was Helen Mirren, the British actress. So whenever I was really sad in those times, I'd be like, I'm having tea and scones with Lady Grief, you know.
She played death.
Yeah.
In a movie. It was a wonderful movie. I can't remember what it was called. But you know, speaking of memory, you just reminded me of a memory when you mentioned your father's death, because when my mother died, and we went home, my brother and I, you know, went to the crematorium, and it was just us two. And I went down back to Montreal, and I went into a record store. I don't know why I did. And they had this huge mural. And they had all the singers listed on that, all the Canadian singers listed on the mural. And one of them was Terry Clark, which is my mother's name, Terry Clark. And I looked at that. I didn't know she was a country and western singer. And taught you, when you talk about synchronicity in those moments. Yes, I saw that, and I thought, just thank you. I was realizing that in those moments of grief and loss and threshold, you know, there's something bigger, something beyond our understanding, something much more greater that holds us. So thank you. Thank you for the possibility to tell that story, because it is, I just in that moment recognize I'm being held by something much larger. And thank you.
Yes, and I think that's an important element to think about, that the deity we meet at the threshold, maybe they're also there to hold us, you know.
Yes, absolutely.
We shouldn't approach them with such, okay, you know, doing to them like you would do it in New York Minute, you know, chop, 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 you know. It's not that way. And I think that's perhaps why we're struggling so much in our culture, because we're not taught such sensibilities. It's discarded as soft skills.
Yeah, as imagination or fantasy or romance. These are not things that are, no. But those of us who can embrace that, yes, we feel a bit exiled and marginal, but we're not. We're not.
No. We're needed. Well, we'll see, but we at least, for nothing else, I feel in some ways perhaps we're having more fun. If fun is the right word,
Play. Play is a good
Play.
word. Play. That's so important. And laughter. I know I laugh a lot. I laugh at the ridiculousness of life. Just it's ridiculous. You think, oh, come on, get a life. It's like, and we can play and honor. When you honor the dark, it no longer has a sway over you. So there's a kind of a sense that, you go into the dark, because when you're in the dark, you dream. That's it. The wonderful thing about, the kind of sect in astrology, the night and the day. So the dark or the night, the gods of the night are who? Venus, Mars, and the moon. They know how to play. Well, the moon can cry now and again, but, crying is part of all of this as well. But Venus and Mars really know how to play at night. And get the gods of the day are Jupiter and Saturn, for God's sake. These are the rules and beliefs. Yeah, and the sun, shine brightly, be creative. We need them all. We need them all.
We do. Our whole birth chart is so many. It's in romance tropes. It's like a why choose. You don't have you have all those planets.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I know we're coming up on time, so I do want to close our conversation with 5 rapid fire questions.
Oh my goodness.
So no overthinking, just whatever comes up. And so the first question is, and speaking of crossing the threshold and perhaps letting go of old things, what's something that you've let go of and you never picked back up?
Gee, I can't remember this, but I don't know if I can answer that. Like, what did I let go of? This is hardly rapid fire, is it? That I can't answer that. Am I allowed not to answer?
Okay,
I guess I'd have to think like kind of. I could say running. I used to run a lot. I could say and I no longer run because I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis for 2 years, which I don't think I have. I think it was something else. So that I stopped running. I stopped running. I stopped running after that. I walk. I can walk fast again, but I stopped running. So you're right. So the threshold was that, like, I lay still for a long time. I couldn't even move. So I guess that was a big threshold in my life.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking of the metaphor. You stopped running.
Yeah, stop running.
If you could invite any character, real, fictional, mythical, for dinner, who would it be?
I guess. Oh my goodness! I guess oh God! I'm torn. Can I choose a few? I'm going to choose my mother, and I'm going to choose Carl Jung. I'm going to choose my father.
That's going to be a real interesting dinner if all 3 of them are there together.
I'm going to say to Carl, you tell them it's okay. You tell them it was okay.
I don't know if that's going to be a dinner or a really deep therapy session, but that's a good one. And what's one pleasure, or maybe a few, that always brings you back to yourself?
First thing comes to mind. Chocolate ice cream.
Good choice.
That's so good.
And right now, in this season of your life, if this season of your life would have a theme song, what would it be?
Oh God, that's a good question. Melissa Manchester's "Better Days." I found myself playing that. She sings about having gone through a dark and lonely night. Better days. It's a wonderful song. Yeah. But Melissa Manchester sings it beautifully. Yeah.
Okay, I have to look that up. And what is something that's, tickling your curiosity these days?
Oh, I think about what goes on in what tickles my curiosity, if you will, is trying to conceptualize, if you will, give birth to conceptualize what sort of what's happened, what's given me meaning in my life. It's sort of like yeah. So because I am in the season of my life where I am contemplating, reflecting on the kind of extraordinariness of life. The extraordinariness of life, not of my life, but of life.
Of life. Yeah. Well, that's a big one.
It's a big one, and so those are interesting questions. It's a big one because as I guess I'm looking. When I say looking back, it's I'm looking back. I'm not looking forward as much. I mean, I know that all that's behind me and with me and in me moves me forward now. I'm just trying to understand what that is or give it meaning.
Give it meaning. Is it akin to kind of trying to see what's the core theme? Is the main image or a story?
It's more a story. It's more it's more a story of how that which is what we spoke about a bit today, about that which is dark, that which is invisible, that which is unknown, has such great capacity to hold us. It's about so it's more a story, I would say. Yeah, a story of life. Again, not my life, not a biography, but the story of life.
Yeah. I'm thinking here, like, even though you said this is your phase that you're in now, but maybe I'm thinking here, I'm in the thick of midlife. I think this is also a time when we start looking at, and it might be good to start looking at, what has carried me? What are the things that are not on the surface, but has propelled me forward and continues to propel me forward? Yeah. Well, to wrap it up, is there anything else that you feel in terms of that you'd like to say about what we talked about, threshold and?
Well, I just like to say, first of all, thank you for inviting me. That I like to say that I love what you do. I love the images, the stories. I love the way that you're thinking about these things. Because that's the other thing, if I was to say about when I'm looking back, when I look back, I can look at you and I can see myself when I was your age. And I can see that aliveness of life. What I'm trying to say, I guess, is so I can look back and see the aliveness and what you're bringing forward and the creativity. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. So part of the sense of the process of aging, which is also a threshold crossing, one looks back and one sees that life still goes on. I'm thrilled that there are younger astrologers like yourself who are asking these questions. I'm thrilled at that. I know some others. There's not huge amounts that I know, but so I wanted to acknowledge that.
Well, thank you, and thank you for supporting my work and engaging with these questions, even if I sometimes throw a bunch of questions at you. And I think it's these conversations that are not just so helpful to me, but I think it's also helpful to the force field of the field of
I think you're right.
Or healers or creatives,
Or creative people, artists. Artists are always people who draw or paint, because I can't draw paint for the life of me. I certainly can't sing. But the same charge as Bruce Springsteen And I remember once sitting in a cafe, and the man comes along with a violin and singing an Italian song, and I sang along with him, and he says, "When you sing, don't sing." And from that moment on, it was like, I was mortified. I was like, but I don't have a voice. Absolutely don't have a voice. Even though I have the same birth chart as Bruce Springsteen, how does this work? But what I'd like to say is this idea of question, and then we should end. I always used to question, quest I am on. Question. But also, too, there's an art of asking questions, and that's really important. The art of asking the right question is so important in any consultation that we do. So thank you, Vanessa.
Well, thank you.